Welcome to Marketing Wins. And I just want to thank my guest today, Brandon Birkmeyer, for joining us. Brandon is a good friend and a marketing genius that has a lot to share when it comes to content, podcasts, and just getting yourself out there online. I'm really excited for him to share with us today. And I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. So Brandon, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Wow, marketing genius. That's a lot to live up to. That's
A
a lot to,
lot
I
to
mean,
live up to.
I-
Big
I'll,
shoes to
I'll,
fill.
I'll be
You
thoughtful, I'll be maybe advanced placement in marketing.
Advanced placement.
Yeah.
You
Something
passed
like
the
that.
AP test in marketing.
Yeah.
Well, you are pretty tall in real life, so the big shoes to fill, it kind of fits. The first time I
Yeah.
met you in person, I got to be honest, I was a little like, "Wow, you're really tall."
It,
So things you
it's
did
all,
not know about Brandon Birkmeyer.
it's all on purpose. It's by design. When you're in branding and marketing, you have to stand out. And so I figured if I'm taller, people will notice me. So, I made that happen. Uh, and here
You
we are.
manifested it, and here it is. You're just
Exactly.
really tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so far I have not succeeded in that. I'm 5'6", 7.5 size shoe, like average female height,
Mhm. I have a
I
downloadable template that'll give you all the tips.
okay, all right.
And
If
you
I want to
know,
get really, really tall and stand out,
mhm,
that's what I need to do.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Got you.
Uh Well, Brandon, thanks so much for being here again. Brandon and I have been part of a mastermind here for about a year and a half together, and we've met at multiple conferences now. We live on like opposite sides of the country, but we see each other probably more in real life than I do with people that live down the street from me, just because of all our different virtual and Zoom meetings that we join in together and some of the conferences we've been to. But I learned a lot from Brandon, and I'm really excited to have him share today. But Brandon, if people have not engaged with you or heard of you already, why don't you give us a little bit of background about how you serve people and, you know, what you offer when you're working with people?
Yeah. I was like trying to come up with something clever. People are like, I'm the Batman of branding. I'm the Barbie, right? I'm the Barbie of branding. No, trying to come up with something. But my background is in advertising and marketing, like very traditional, classically trained advertising and marketing. I worked at the large ad agencies my whole career. I'm now 21 years into marketing, and working on Fortune 100 companies like Apple, Coca-Cola, Wells Fargo, Walmart, doing the media planning, basically, which is figuring out how do you spend advertising dollars? How do you build an audience? How do you build a brand, and executing that strategy? So that was the first, part of my life. And then 4 years ago, I started working with entrepreneurs and helping them build their marketing programs from the ground up, and started on my own journey. And that's where we are today. But I mean, what's interesting is I realize that even someone who's been in a corporate job in this advertising world, I realized when I left and had to do it for myself that, it's actually really difficult when you don't have, the $100 million budgets, and you are building something that is from the ground up, and it's for you, or it's in your local market. It's a lot more work. And for someone starting from zero, I had a great resume, but I had no reputation. And that's a big part of my story, is that I had to start from scratch building a reputation that mattered in my market. I had to figure out how to get out there, network, like I know a lot of you have had to get out there and do. I had to build a reference point online where people Googled me and they could find something. And I had to have ideas that were my own. I had to have perspective. And all of that started, I had to build from scratch. So I spent the past 4 years doing that. And really what I discovered is that for me, creating content became the way that I like established my brand. And so where we are today is I help people do that. I help people build their content to help establish their brands. And I have a podcast called Brands on Brands, where I talk about that all the time, leaning into this branding yourself kind of idea. So that's where we are in a nutshell, if that helps.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and I both kind of live in this content space. So, I mean, what you're saying speaks right up my alley, because I've leveraged content in a huge way over the years as my way of kind of positioning to new people interacting with me that I know about XYZ. Like there's a lot of power in that subconscious message of what comes out when you put out content. I'm curious, how have you structured your content in a way that is nimble enough to adjust with changing trends, but yet still has some tried and true, foundational things in it that we all know work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll be honest, when starting out, just creating anything was good. So because I think so many of us, we don't create anything, or we don't, like, we hire
Right.
people and we still don't like put anything out. um and so like creating anything, but then also putting yourself into it. I know a lot of businesses hire out content to be created, but then they don't end up in it as much. So finding a way to put yourself into it while you're working with professionals or doing it yourself, I think is important. So for me, when I was starting, it was literally just get anything out. I think I did 90 episodes of a podcast with no
Wow.
real plan, other than I knew the block I was on, right? I knew what neighborhood I was in terms of content. My theme was marketing and branding, and I could stay in that realm, but I didn't have any real method or to my madness of what episode was coming out each week. I know that a
Mm,
lot of people plan social media in terms of like monthly blocks, right? Like, here's my theme for March or February or whatever. I didn't do that. I just, what was inspiring me that week, what came up that was topical. I did,
yeah.
however, after doing that for a while, kind of feel like I started to hit a wall in terms of creativity. It wasn't sustainable in terms of me continuing to like feel inspired. So I had to create some more systems around that. And for me, I actually now think about all of my content in chunks, like in blocks. I call it,
Mm,
series or seasons, or however you define it. For me, because it's a podcast, I think of them as seasons. But if it's social media, I would just say, okay, what's my quarterly content block or my 6-month content block? What is this going to be about? And I think about that because I can design a series of something based on one
yeah.
idea. For me, the problem was having a million ideas. What do I need? A new idea every week. But having a one idea to last me 6 months was a super easy way to attack content. So that's how
Yeah.
I start. I start with one big idea, and then I fill in all the ideas under that are going to help tell that story.
I was at a podcasting conference actually when I first heard this concept of like doing a season of things. And I had never, I don't know why I thought that it was just this like ongoing perpetual, content for forever kind of a thing. But the concept of a season is actually really brilliant. And when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, it just felt like it took this weight off my shoulders of, yeah, I can have as many seasons as I want, and I can take breaks between them as long as I want. Um, yeah, it just was a mental roadblock that I don't know why I'd never thought about that before. So I'm
Well, I think what
curious.
the roadblock,
Go
I think
ahead.
too, is for a lot of people, when you tell them you have to create content, even like it feels unending. It feels like
Mm,
I got to do this every week. How am I going to keep this up?
yeah,
But if you say, hey, we're going to get together one time and make a bunch of stuff, or you sit down with you, like if you're the content creator in your own business and you're like, okay, my content block for creation, I have one day this month, or I have one day this quarter, right?
yeah,
Or during the summer, I usually have a few days, like each year. That being like, okay, in that period of time, what am I going to create? And you say, okay, I'm going to create a block of content based on one idea. That's helpful. So I do that like once a quarter. I'm like, every
yeah,
quarter, I'm like, I'm going to create a block of content. What do I want to talk about this quarter? So in one day or 2 days, however long it takes to record all that, I'm focusing on this one idea, and it's less intimidating because I know it's going to be done after those 2 days. It's not this thing
mhm,
I have to commit to doing every week. And I think for a lot of us, that's the scary part, is
yeah,
like, we're all very busy. How do we get the time to do something every week when we know we are already over, we're way over our budget on time. You know,
right,
we want to be working 40 and we're working 60 or 80. Like, how am I going to squeeze an hour in of anything?
yeah.
Uh, but if you tell them, hey, it's just one project, like maybe we'll do it once this year, and you focus on one idea. I love project-based planning. So that's I think what helps me get past the fear.
Yeah, batching work is definitely a beneficial thing that I've found. It's sometimes hard to fit it in and like protect the time to truly batch the work. But like once you do have that chunk of whatever made, it's so much easier to then parse it out over time. Do you have any other tips for busy folks that are just feeling overwhelmed with like, where do I even start with content creation?
Yeah, I think for me, I try to figure out like once I have my idea can be anything. So like you pick a topic, right? Like there's millions of ways to figure out what that's going to be. But usually I try to make it a little more direct in terms of the research. So I say, okay, in my field, like in the marketing space, especially in the content creation space, what's the topic right now that I want to talk about? So in this space, maybe it's like TikTok, right? People want to know about TikTok or short videos. People want to know about short videos. What is a series I can do based on like how to create short video content? Based on that, I have two ways to approach filling that in, right? I either take an episodic approach or I take a I call it a stacking approach. So
Mm.
the sequential approach is like you say, okay, what are all the questions that everyone's going to ask about this topic that you can Google it or you just off the top of your head. What's every question someone would ask if they're getting started building short form videos, right? And you just list out all the questions that you come up with. And you can even like look in chat rooms, like what are the questions people are asking? You can look at what other people are creating. What are other questions people have answered? And you make a list, all the questions. And then each of those questions now is a starting point for a piece of content that's going to fill in this series of content. And that's how people write books, by the way. Like they'll pick a topic and they'll like come up with a title for their series. And they say, okay, like what are all the ingredients in this puzzle? And then they like, after, you list 25 ingredients of things that you need to write the book on short form content or whatever it is. Then you kind of whittle away the ones that you wrote down that were less really part of the group. And then
Yeah.
you elaborate from there. You break it into chapters and subchapters. So that's like the first one. Like that's the series method. The second, which I love, is I call it like the skeleton key of content or content stacking, which is I'm better at thinking in like groups. So I'm like just three things.
Mm.
I can only think of three things at a time, right? So what are the three things that matter when you create short video content? And I'll answer that question in like bigger buckets. So you have to be creative. You have to have something that is trending, and it has to have great music. So it's like, okay, those are my three things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't come up with, I just thought of this right now. It wasn't very difficult. I love easy, right?
Yeah.
Now, each of those three things helps me focus. Okay, within one of those three things, what are three things that help me explain that one thing? And so I call it the skeleton key because each one unlocks a door to the next level of a
Mm.
brainstorm. And I'll have to
It's like
think
a
of three things at
Super
a time.
Mario level.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Super Mario game.
But because I think in these like very simple patterns, my brain
Yeah.
doesn't go all over the place trying to be
Yeah.
creative. I have a very confined box to fit my ideas into, and it helps so that every season I have something new to talk about and continue this content process.
Wow. Man, I love it. I love it. It's interesting, like before we hit record on this, we were chatting a little bit and we were talking a little bit about we saw each other a few weeks ago at a conference and just the power of being around other people and getting in the right mindset. And sometimes content creation, a huge piece of it, you have to get in the right mindset and get over that imposter syndrome of like, who am I to be making content about XYZ? Have you experienced that with any of the folks that you've talked to or worked with of like, how did they like, do you have any tips, I guess, around like, how do you get over that imposter syndrome to say, no, yeah, you are qualified to go out and create this content. The world actually does need to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I think everyone's different, right? So you may not be the creator, but I still
Mm-hmm.
think creating content, if you run a business, hiding isn't going to work, right? If you want people to come in the door, you've had to get out there. You've had to network. You've had to put signs out, whatever the thing is, you had to get out there. Whether you want to be the face of your business or not is a choice. I love personal brands. I love especially if you have a service-based business, it's a no-brainer. Like people want to work with you.
Yeah.
If you are like a retail business, I can understand how that would be different, but then you have to put yourself into the persona of your business and say, okay, if I am this brand, what does this, how do I create for the store or whatever it is?
Right.
You still have to, be the head as if it's a real living thing. And what are the things I want to talk about? Or, that's why so many companies create mascots, by the way, because it's like, it's way easier for you to like create content around a Ronald McDonald back in the day than it was to just, we make better burgers, so like people like to have these themes to work with. And then
Yeah.
as you get bigger and more established, then you can just play off other ideas. Uh, but you do have to tie into a persona a little bit. But to make it a little easier to get over that imposter syndrome, to your question, I think for me, I have to figure out ahead of time, like, who is this for? Right. Like before I do any content creation, having clarity as to what I'm creating, who it's for, and why I'm creating it helps me get past the imposter stuff, because I'm driving towards a purpose. I'm doing this for a reason. If you don't know your reason for creating content, you're never going to love it.
Right.
You're never going to want to do it. But if you know that if you create a certain amount of things, it's going to, either A, answer some customers' questions that you've always been getting, or B, lead people to you that are searching for you online that haven't been finding you, they've been finding your competition, or C, it's going to help someone convert that's already found you because now you've nurtured them along the way and they trust you. When you go into understanding these goals, suddenly you're like, yeah, if I can help these customers along their journey, absolutely, this is worth it. Now that I know it's worth it, the next thing that hits you, that the fear comes from, is like not knowing what to create. So either working
Mhm.
with a professional like yourself or a coach, something that I do,
Yeah.
I think is the next step, because now you have confidence in the process as opposed to that overwhelm of not knowing what to do or create. So
Yeah.
I think that's the next step. Because if I go in and say, hey, we're going to sit down today, we're going to get clear on exactly who we're creating for, the kind of things that they like, so that you're not creating things that they don't like, which, would suck, uh, and how to make it effective. So it's not a waste of your time. And we're going to do that together. And you're going to leave here confident that you've built something that's going to work. I think that gets rid of some of the imposter syndrome, because you now have an ally in this battle. And you can do that. You can be a DIYer, download this information, do it yourself, but you have the information. You have to be
Yeah.
informed and educated to get past fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on it a little bit there without saying it, but I've heard it explained in a similar way of just like, once you realize that others really need to hear certain pieces, and you know that that's something that they're going to find valuable, and that if they didn't hear it, they'd be wasting their time and money on. Um, it's like, well, why are you keeping that to yourself? And when I flipped the script on that of like, hey, I actually know a lot about XYZ, and you can fill in the blanks around whatever your specialty is. There's a lot of people out in the world that have no idea, and have no idea where to start learning about that topic and subject matter that you know a ton about. And it's like, really, you're going to keep that locked up inside of you and not share it when you could be helping people? And so I think, like, and you touched on it, like once you get clear on what people actually need and what they're looking for, that helps to take away the imposter syndrome, because then it's like, well, it's not about me, it's about them. It's not about putting on becoming this famous person on
Yeah.
TikTok or whatever, you know.
Well, imagine, I think everyone can relate if they've had a child. It's like when you suddenly realize you're going to have a kid, you're not prepared. You're a full on imposter. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But you realize eventually it's not about you, it's about them. And you figure it out, right? You
Yeah.
get help, you read the books, and you show up because you have no other choice, because it's about them. And you kind of just get over yourself and you do the work. And
Yeah.
what's great is everything happens like you're given as much as you can handle. You take on just a little bit at a time instead of this huge daunting thing.
Yeah.
And piecing it out like that, taking on just the little steps piece by piece, makes it so much easier than
Yeah.
being like, tomorrow I've got to be a content creation machine,
Right.
or whatever it is. I've got to be a star,
Yeah. So, what are some of your favorite types of content to be making right now?
Yeah. So I like it all, but I need something I can do consistently. So
Mhm.
for me, there's two things to think about. It's the mode you create in. So like, where are you comfortable creating? Are you a
Yeah.
writer? do you have a camera on? Are you a talker? Do you like having conversations? Like, are you a person who's out and about with their phone? Like, what is your place that is natural to you to be a creator, to be someone who's writing or creating some kind of content? Even if you don't consider yourself creative, where do you feel comfortable creating? Like,
Right.
figure that out. The rest is distribution and can be solved by yourself or with help. The rest is
Mm.
distribution.
Yeah.
So for me, I tried to start blogging and writing because websites need content. I even tried hiring some of that out. It never felt like authentic or in my voice. So I had to do it myself, but I didn't like writing as much. Then I tried video, but it was very much like, where do I look? And then I lose my train of thought. And then I tried podcasting and it felt very natural to me. That was my place where I can sit down every week, have a conversation with someone like you, and it felt organic because I'm just talking. And then that became something I could turn into blogs and turn into social media and turn into YouTube and whatever else. And it became practice. Like I was bad at first, and then I'm getting better every day. And now it's easier. So
Yeah.
for me, I think for a lot of people, the stepping stone might be conversations. It might be bringing other people in. And even if you don't want to be the thought leader in your industry or whatever it is, you might have other people in your industry to bring in and talk to, like we're doing right here on this call.
Right.
And eventually, like, even if you were like the local toy store or whatever, you could be like, who are all the people in my market that talk about things like the best toys of the year, places to go shopping and whatever, bring them in to talk about it. Eventually, just being in those conversations, you might have ideas that you want to share and you can share them in the conversation. Or you like, you know what? I didn't really get to say all I wanted to say. I'm now going to do something solo where I'm just telling people my extra couple thoughts on this thing. So in terms of creating content, yeah, I start with the mode. And for me, I love podcasting, but the output changes all the time. Like the trends
Hmm.
change all the time. Like TikTok short videos, Instagram reels, and YouTube shorts, those like 30 seconds or minute or less videos are what's popular. I don't create in that mode because right now that's not my comfort zone,
Yeah.
but we will pull one 30-second clip from this, edit it and distribute it to that because that's where people are. I can't just avoid it because I don't want to dance right on TikTok, but I still have to show up for my business, you know?
That's one
Um,
thing I have not had a chance to see is if you can dance or not. So it
yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
that's questionable, huh?
I'm a beast on the dance floor. Let's not get
Oh,
it twisted.
okay.
I
Just
just
not
don't
going to do
like
a TikTok dance.
I just don't like TikTok dances. It's so restrictive and you've got to follow choreography, you know,
I
but
could not agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. Yeah, I don't want to set my camera up in my office or my living room and do some funky dance for marketing
yeah,
purposes. It's just not me.
right. But you know what? Like, I think now that I even like that I have like this mode of creating things in terms of series, I am even considering, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. It's super easy to sit here at my desk that I sit at all the time and do this recording. But like
Yeah.
me taking my phone and saying, you know, I'm going to apply the same mentality. I want to do 10 videos that answer these 3 questions or whatever. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to do it today from my, lounge or my kitchen. Uh, like that's easier to get to, throw some music at it. But same thing. I have to sit there and be like, today I'm going to do this once and see how it
Right.
goes. One
Right.
video creation, I just can't do it. I can't just create one video because I'm going to question, is it good? Is it bad? I'm going to overthink it. But like a
Well,
series,
yeah.
easy.
And I found like once I start making one video, then like the creative juices swirl and I'm like, oh, well, let me hit pause and hit record again and do a different video on this other idea that just came to mind while I was talking. And then before I know it, I've got 4 or 5 videos, But I
Yeah.
think part of that is it's a muscle that as a content creator, because I've been doing this now for, I don't know, 12, 15 years, it's something that it just starts sparking. Whereas I literally was on a call this morning with a client where he was like, oh, I was just at this speaking gig at this university. I should have pulled my phone out and recorded a quick video on campus saying, oh, I'm here at blah blah blah, giving back to the students at this program and really excited about sharing about XYZ. That could have been a really quick simple story or TikTok or anything like that. But because he's not in that like frame of mind of like, oh yeah, like what are those opportunities as I'm going throughout my day to make content, like I do think there's a content creation muscle that maybe folks like you and I have maybe flexed a little bit more than other folks have in the past.
Yeah, I think it helps if there's prompts in those situations. Like the day in the life stuff, I'm not great at. I don't in the moment, it's hard for me to get out of the moment and think of content. It just is. It's not my natural way of going around. It feels like inauthentic to me. But having prompts and a scene, great. Like if I know I'm going to be at a great venue, like a school or something that has great backgrounds,
Yeah.
cool. But if I have pre-designed prompts that are like, okay, here are 3 questions that I've written in my list of questions that I can answer. I can pull that up and answer some questions just from an interesting, and I can mention, hey, I'm out here today doing this thing. But I wanted to talk about this and whatever it is. But that's,
Yeah.
again, I think that's when you are out there and you're like creating as completely a part of your business, great. But I'd go back to the starting point, which is just what is the series of information you want to create? And then you can determine your environment. And maybe one of those series, you're like, I did this 2 or 3 times in a very safe place, like my office. Maybe
Yeah.
the third or fourth time, you're like, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to go to the kitchen today, or I'm going to go on a walk. But I think the planning part has to happen when you aren't comfortable. Because if
Yeah.
you just get out there and try it without that plan, it's not going to fit. It's not going to feel like you did a good job because it didn't have that structure to it.
Yeah. 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 There's so much of a mental piece here when it comes to content creation. Obviously, then, once you've created it, then it's like, how do you strategically get it out? But that's like a whole nother,
Uh,
whole nother battle to fight there. But um, if people are walking away from listening to this conversation today and they want to walk away with one tangible thing they can go do to go get another win in their marketing, maybe do content a little bit better, or maybe just be a personal brand or show up as a personal brand better. Do you have any pieces of advice of what would you tell somebody if they wanted to just go out and get their next step towards a marketing win?
yeah, for me, I don't know who said it, but I agree that there's like, if you're looking for some clarity in what you're going to create, it has to come from you taking some action. It can't come from you sitting behind a whiteboard drawing all these things out.
Mm,
When I say plan something, I mean give yourself some structure, but then get out of there and go do it. Right? Like ask some simple questions, and then move past it. So for me, until you get out there and you do these things a few times, it's never going to feel perfect or right. So
yeah.
when you, that's why I did 90 episodes just random, because I needed a lot of comfort figuring out this content thing. But
Yeah.
now that I've learned, I'm like, I tell anyone else, like, if you just go do 5 things, get
Yeah.
out there and create 5 things, that action of creating will make you feel more confident in what you should be creating about. Maybe you'll throw those 5 things away, but that action will give you clarity as to what feels right in terms of the theme itself of the content, the way you're delivering the content, or even the form that we talked about, like where it's going to be you better on in screen or writing. I had to
Right.
do a few of those things poorly to realize, this isn't how I like to create. So take action so that you can get clarity on what works best for you.
I love that. Just getting out there and doing it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's where the imposter syndrome starts to come into play. We start focusing so much on being perfect and looking like the big time influencer who maybe has been around for double the amount of time we've been.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you a
it's
bonus win here
okay.
because if
We all
everyone
love
else is going to give
bonuses.
you 1 win, why shouldn't I give you 2 so that it's
You can give
double
me
the
two.
value
I'll
of
gladly
every
take
other
double.
show? Yeah. I want it to be twice as good as all the other shows you
Twice
have.
as
So
good.
yeah. So here's the second one, right? If you can put yourself into the content in an authentic way, I don't mean like your physical body or whatever, but your ideas and your perspective. I think ideas are what really create reputation. So, for
Hmm.
example, if you and me see someone across the room and we're talking about them, like what they're wearing, what they look like, those things are gossip. But if we're
Right.
talking about their ideas and what they stand for, or their interesting perspective, or something they said that was like struck a chord, their ideas are reputation building. And that's what you can build a business around, is some
Mm,
interesting idea or helpful, valuable point of information. And you getting out there and sharing more of your ideas is going to take you to the next level.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Putting something out there that people want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Put
Give them
some
something to
ideas
talk
out
about,
there. Yeah. I
you
love
know?
it. I love it. Yeah. That's great. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for sharing so much wisdom here. I know even as a content creator for other people, sometimes it's hard. We all need that boost, that little spark of energy, those extra tips that, even I've gleaned a few ideas of like, how can I approach my own content creation in a better way? I've got the systems nailed down for client work that I do, but sometimes when it comes to myself, like it is hard to stay consistent. It's hard to like not get in my head. So I really appreciate some of the things that you've shared today. They've been really helpful. If people want to get more from you and learn more from you, where's the best place to point people to?
Yeah, if you go to brandsonbrands.com, all my content and like advice typically sits there. You'll also find like if you're like, oh, that podcast thing sounds interesting. I have a free starter kit that's like, here's all the questions you're going to ask first to get there. And you
Great.
can just go to brandsonbrands.com/starter kit to get all those questions answered. But yeah, the website in general is the easiest place to find me and everything that I'm putting out there into the world.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, thanks so much for jumping on today, Brandon, and just you're a content machine. So I appreciate you sharing some of the magic behind the machine that everyone sees online.
Thank you.
And
Absolutely.
just some of these insider tips that you've shared. So thanks again for being on the show, and look forward to sharing this with the world.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
If you liked what you just heard, please hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes. And while you're at it, go ahead and leave us a review. That not only helps us out, but it helps others discover great interviews just like this one.